Hey everyone, welcome to my shop. My name is Brandon Olson, and today we're going to make a beautiful keepsake box out of this gorgeous piece of quartersawn sycamore. Let's get started. Alright, so we have our lumber on our table here, and I've made some plans that are going to be available to go along with this episode. They cover pretty much everything you need, all the detail at the end. Got a little summary written up there to help you along the way. So now we want to pick where our pieces want to come from out of these boards. So go ahead and find your show face. I think this one's going to be my show face here. So there, we're going to go ahead and start laying it out. Okay, I'm going to cut my board out here using a pole saw, but you can certainly quicken this operation by using a miter saw or a band saw, whatever you want to do. There's our box. Okay, so we have our board for our box here. And now is a good time to determine what you're going to use for your panels for the bottom and the top. I'm going to use some of this figured veneer here. And I'm going to use some MDF as a substrate. So we'll get in that a little bit later. So now what we want to do is we want to take this board, we want to square it up, and we also want to get it down to our dimensions. We're going to take this down through the joiner, the planer. From there, we'll lay out some joinery, and then we'll break it down after that. So what I like to do first is determine which way the grain is running. So we've got the grain running that way. And the way I found which way the grain is running is if you look at the end of your board, I can exaggerate this a little bit. You can see your grain running along. Well, if the grain starts to run up, you can see that it's all coming up towards that end. Well, then you know your grain is running this way. And from there, take a pencil and I will mark up the entire surface. So now we're going to take this over to the joiner, flatten one side. And as you can see here, I have a low spot with some pencil lines left, and the rest is flat. So we'll take that back of the joiner to get rid of it. Alright, now we have one flat face right off the jointer, and it is super smooth, and I'm happy with that. So what I always do when I get done doing the joiner, I like to remember which side I passed through the joiner. So I draw, what do they call it? I don't know, joiner's mark, something like that. Back at the joiner, we'll square our edge 90 degrees to the face. Okay, here at the bandsaw, we're going to set the fence what we want. So we know we want our board thickness to be 1/2 inch. So I'm going to leave at least 1/8 proud. So we'll go 5/8. So let's set our fence for 5/8. And when you're feeding your board through your saw here, use a slow pace. Don't go real fast, because if you go too fast, your blade will kind of wander a little bit, and then you're going to have a lot more cleanup to do. So take a slow, steady pace, take your time, and do a good job. So let's get going here. Back to the joiner to flatten the face. Using the planer, we'll take the board down to our desired thickness. Here at the table saw, we'll go ahead and rip our board down to our desired width. Okay, now that we have this board dimension for our width for our box, we're going to set that aside for now, and we're going to focus on the top and bottom. Alright, so now we have our substrate broken down here. We're going to go out and lay out our veneer. So now we've got two sheets, top and bottom. Now we're ready to make our panel. So it's going to be sandwiched like this. Okay, so now we need to glue it down. Okay, so I've got my two little clamping boards for the top and bottom, some jigs, well, some scrap blocks here so we can fit our clamps underneath to get good pressure all around. So now we're ready to start adding the glue. And they do make special veneer glue you can use, but I'm just going to use regular standard tight bond. Now I can go ahead and remove the tape and use an X-Acto knife to trim off the veneer. Okay, so we have all our pieces out here. Now we need to cut the grooves for the panels here. And I went ahead and marked 1/4 inch up from the bottom and 1/4 inch down from the top. And our grooves are going to sit up on top of that 1/4 inch line we just made. Now, these might vary in thickness. What we're going to do is they're about 3/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the table saw, cut my grooves in them, and I'm going to sneak up on that fit, dial it in for each panel. So for the top, so this would be the top, I'll run all my tops through, make sure this one fits in the top, and I'll readjust if I need to for the bottom panel and fit that one, sneak up on the fit as well. So we've already squared an edge 90. So now we're gonna cross cut this 90 to this edge so we can tell if we're getting a nice fit in there. So let's go to the table saw, cross cut these, and then we'll start making our grooves. Okay, so now we're gonna use a test piece here and cut our groove. We know we want a 1/4 inch gap here, and we want it to be about a 1/4 inch deep. Now we don't necessarily know the width yet, so we're gonna sneak up on that once we get our depth done. So let's go ahead and do that. At the table saw, I'll slowly sneak up on my fit, checking the depth after each pass and raising the blade if necessary. Now that I have all the settings locked in, I can go ahead and make my grooves, keeping in mind that I will increase the width of the groove to accept each panel individually. Here we have a pretty snug fit. Okay, now we have all the grooves done, we can go ahead and do like a dry clamp on this so we can get the dimensions for the width of our lid and bottom and for the length as well. Okay, bring it up and fold it. And we'll stretch a piece of tape across that joint. We're pretty square just off the tape here without any clamps, so that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. 4.5. About 9 7/8. Now we need to add 1/2 inch. So we've got 5 for the width, 10 3/8 on the length. Now, since I'm using veneer and MDF substrate, I'm not going to have any expansion or contraction with my panels. If you're using solid wood, make sure you leave, I suggest, 1/16 of a gap on either end. So subtract 1/8 off your total width. You don't need to do it for your length, as long as you have your grain running this way. Lengthwise, it's not going to expand or contract along the length. Wood always moves across its width. So keep that in mind when you're making your box. At the table saw, we'll go ahead and rip our panels down to their width. Using the crosscut sled, we'll go ahead and cut our panels down to length. Now we can go ahead and sand the interior and the panels using supersonic speed. Okay, before I assemble all this and glue it up, I'm going to mix up some shellac and put some finish on the interior and the panel as well. This is the kind I use here. 1 ounce of shellac to 2 ounces of denatured alcohol. A little bit heavy, that's just fine. So I'll go ahead and pour the flakes in. And pour the alcohol. And we'll let that dissolve for a little while, and when it's ready, we'll come back and apply the finish to our pieces. Alright, so now the shellac is dissolved. We'll go ahead and apply that to the interior. I've went ahead and taped off the mitered edges so I don't get any shellac on that, so we don't have any problems during the glue up. As you can see, just a little bit of shellac will really make that figure pop. Once it's dry to the touch, like it's already dry to the touch now, we can go ahead and start applying second coat. They're dry now, so we can go ahead and lightly abrade the surface. Alright, now we can put on the last coat here. Dry. We'll come back, take the tape off at a later date. So now we're going to do the insides here. Oh yeah. That's pretty nice. Oh wow. That's beautiful. Oh yeah. That's awesome. Oh yeah. Look at that. Okay, now that we've put finish on the panels and the interior of the box, we can go ahead and glue it up. At the bandsaw, I'll go ahead and remove the lid from the rest of the box. Using the flat reference surface, we'll now go ahead and sand the bandsaw marks off. Now it's time to install the hinges. I'm using Brusso 103 stop hinges, which keep the lid open at 95 degrees. Using the marking gauge and the hinge itself, we'll go ahead and set the depth and scribe that line to the box. Now with the bench, we can go ahead and chop away the waste and create our mortise for the hinges. Now we can go ahead and take the hinges off of the box and transfer the mortise to the lid. Back at the bench, we can now remove the waste here for our mortise, just like we did before. Keep in mind there are alternative methods to removing the waste here to create a mortise. A router is a perfectly good example. Instead of rounding over the interior of the box, I thought I would add a decorative detail, using the chisel to carve it away. At the table saw, we can now cut out the area for our splines. Once everything is sanded, we can now apply the finish. And I'm using the same blonde shellac I mixed up earlier. I'll now go ahead and buff in some wax and smooth out the finish. Alright, that concludes the project here. I really like the way the box came out. The panels look great. The leopardwood sepele, quartersawn sycamore, Brusso Stop Hinges. I really love the box, and I appreciate you following along and watching the build with me. I know it was kind of a long video, but take it easy. It's my first one, so make sure you subscribe and like, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care.